Okay, there will be scenarios in the future where you need to work both sides of the equation. So what do I mean by that? First off, there will be certain situations where you're negotiating with the seller and you're not 100% certain with the comps or maybe the rehab number, or maybe it's in an area you haven't done a wholesale deal in before, or maybe you're just newer. So you're not confident enough to write up a contract, or you haven't gotten to a price point that makes sense, that you know you can get the deal done at, so you haven't written a contract because of that either. So what you can do is work both sides. And what I mean by that is talking to the seller and talking to the buyer simultaneously, even without having documentation, so that you can eventually have an overlap or land in the middle to where you can have a successful deal, okay? The way this works is you need to talk about overlapping price points with both sides so that you can move them into the middle. A good example of this is, let's say you have a deal and you know, even with your uncertainties, you know you can get the deal done at $75,000, okay? You need to get this property contracted at $75,000. However, the seller in this situation won't do the deal unless they contract at $85,000. Okay, they want to sell it at $85,000. So since they are wanting higher than what you know you can do the deal at, you're a little unsure. That's higher than where you want to be at. Maybe you haven't done very many deals in this area, so 85 is kind of pushing it. So what you're going to do is then talk to a buyer and say, hey, Mr. Buyer or Miss Buyer, I have this deal. I don't have it contracted at this point, but I know I can get this deal done at $95,000. So with the seller, you've told them you need the deal at 75, and with the buyer, you've told them you need the deal at 95. Both sides are going to start negotiating with you. The seller, like I mentioned previously, wants to be at 85, and maybe the buyer wants to be at 80, okay? So what you're going to be doing is having conversations with the seller side, trying to push them to a price point that is below 80, because 80 works for the buyer. And then for the buyer, you're going to try and push their price point above 85, because that works for the seller. And what will happen is the numbers that you are negotiating with the seller and the buyer will slowly tweak to where with the seller, you're going to get them maybe at 82. And with the buyer, you might get them at 85. And then at that point, you have a spread. Now, in these situations, your fees usually aren't the biggest because you're already kind of pushing it. But you can still get a deal out of it. And if you do it right, sometimes the fee turns out really big. But there are definitely situations where you can have these one-on-one conversations with the seller, one-on-one conversations with the buyer, even before you have any documentation in place. But especially for the deals that you're uncertain about, you're in a newer market, you don't have confidence on the rehab, or you don't have confidence on the comps itself. And it's an opportunity to find an alignment by just having them meet in the middle. So don't forget that as an opportunity. It's not just negotiating with the seller and then having them in place and then starting the conversation with the buyer and then get them in place. A lot of these conversations can overlap and be happening simultaneously so that you can get a deal done. So utilize that technique. Talk to the buyer, talk to the seller, and work both sides.